be inspired by your word. If you can find a way to love fear and go, whoa, what is fear teaching me right now? What do I need to? And we have, I was contemplating wearing it, but I didn't know if it was appropriate. I've got a fuck fear shirt. And fuck is an acronym for face it, understand it, control it, know it.
Are you ready? I am ready, yeah, ready to dive into this love. No fear, no, yeah. Are you ready? I am ready, yeah, ready to dive into this love. No fear, no, no, no.
Yeah, if I said it, then you know I meant it.
Hey, Tony Blauer here, and I'm excited to be on the Live Through Love podcast with Ruben. And what we're going to talk about in this episode is really how to reframe our relationship with fear and learn to use fear as fuel in your life so it doesn't get you down and create that inertia that stops you from leaning into love.
Tony Blauer.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, buddy. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I love the studio, and I still love that piece that we did for my wife, custom colors. It's very it's sweet. Every morning, as soon as we walk out of our bedroom, try to remind us to start the day with love. It's so easy to forget, right?
It is.
It's so easy to forget, especially the last couple of years. The world has really changed, and fear has been weaponized, and we don't realize, like through osmosis, everywhere. So it's kind of interesting. We were talking offline just about that, and just the it's almost like a yin yang, love and fear. So, but anyways, welcome to my show. Thanks for coming.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I just started yakking, and it's like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, this is what it's about. It's about you.
Just chilling, talking.
I want to talk about you and your mindset, but exactly, your shirt says no fear for those listening right now, and it's not exactly. It's not no fear. It's KNOW. No.
Yes.
So, what is knowing fear?
Yeah. So backstory, of course, you remember the No Fear Company, the Adrenaline Company, and growing up in the 70s and 80s, as a teen then, in the 80s, I mean, I bought every No Fear shirt because it was kind of like that guy thing of like, you want to live with no fear. And being a lifelong martial artist and having a strong, like an inner conflict between, well, I'm getting really good at this stuff. Why am I still afraid to assert myself? Why am I afraid before a competition or sparring or to defend myself, or somebody just did something in public and I'm hesitating being a courageous bystander, but I've got all this physical skill. And I was very conflicted by that. And so I make this joke because I bought every one of their shirts, but they were defective because I still had fear, So, and then one day in teaching, our stuff was always very cerebral, very behavioral oriented. And we were just talking about psychology and fear management. And I was doing kind of like a little stand-up gig on a whiteboard, like writing no fear on the board, saying there's no such, trying to get people to realize there's no such thing. And that if you can lean into fear and accept it without virtual signaling about, oh, I'm being vulnerable, and don't manipulate people, just saying, look, hey man, I'm scared. And then that person next to you go, I'm scared too, but let's do this. And so this idea that fear is contagious, but so is courage. And I'm doing this talk. And when a student says like, hey, Coach Blauer, what would happen if you put like the K and a W on it? Because I was like, I wrote it there and I was like, I get goosebumps right now remembering that. It's like, holy shit. And that suddenly, like that was an epiphany, a light bulb moment, that distinction between this idea that we want to walk around, male or female, going, I got no fear, and it's preposterous. As you're a relatively new dad, your life changes, your kid's born, and suddenly you have new fears. Even if, and you're good at this, and it's part of your messaging, is to, like, if you love somebody a lot, you look both ways before you cross the street. But you can also say, I do that because of my fear of getting run over by a car. It's a lot of it is semantics, and it's very subtle. My whole thing is I really believe that at the core of everything we do and decide, there's sometimes a non-conscious fear filter that's influencing how we make decisions. And that if we could lean into that, we would improve our self-awareness. And if we improved our self-awareness, we'd improve our critical thinking. And if we improve self-awareness and critical thinking, our situational awareness and everything that's going on in the world, you kind of like, you're a little bit more independent as opposed to just reading a tweet and going, this must be happening.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's interesting because you turn on the TV, and I love saying this, we have a buffet of fear being thrown at us.
Yes.
We can't digest it fast enough. And I say we operate at love or we operate at fear, but I never say fear is bad. We need it. It's how we keep ourselves from dying or protect our loved ones or whatever. But at the same time, it's about not operating in fear, from fear, because of whatever's being told and dictated, not having an opinion anymore, not critically thinking, not reacting to everything versus responding to things.
Correct. Yeah. So our whole, and this is one of the divisions of my company is doing these talks and educating and mentoring and coaching on how do we reframe fear and use it as fuel, as opposed to like a posture or an attitude. So I love what you said there. Is but fear is real, and if we look at this metaphor, this is a useful one that I share a lot, and it really resonates with people. And that's one of the things we try to do. Is I remember some backstory. So in the '80s, when I started teaching self-defense, one of my students got his ass kicked. And when he told me what happened, and at the time I was doing boxing and Jeet Kune Do and Wing Chun and like all the stuff. And this is 1979, 1980, 13 years before the first UFC, when mixed martial arts really started, exploding. And there were a handful of people, Bruce Lee was doing mixed martial arts. They just didn't call it back then. And so I was teaching the student Mitch how to box, how to clinch. I was a wrestler. I was been doing Taekwondo for, almost 8-9 years, fanatical. And I was teaching him all of the compartments, almost like teaching somebody how to paint. But if they don't love painting, they're not going to produce anything good, right? So you can have all the biomechanics if you can't connect, your instincts and intuition and your emotion to it. And that's how a lot of self-defense is taught. It's just biomechanics. It's brush strokes. It's like sweep the leg, right? And that was a movie reference for people that don't remember. I forget what was the movie.
Wax
remember?
Off.
Yeah, but there was that. But there was was a Karate Kid. Yeah, sweep the leg, sweep the leg. So so Mitch loses this fight, and when he tells me what happened, I realized I make this joke. It's like the god of self-defense hit me with a lightning bolt. I was 20 years old, and I went, oh my God, we teach self-defense wrong, meaning I had taught him the mechanics, but I hadn't taught him the emotion, the psychology, how to manage fear, how to de-escalate yourself before. So you have no chance of de-escalating someone else if you don't recognize, and that's that self-awareness piece. Oh my God, I'm like, my sympathetic nervous system's freaking out now, my adrenaline's going. And I'm standing there like you and I bump into each other in a parking lot, and I'm going, man, I don't want to fucking fight. Guys do that, right? They ball up a fist and they point, they get in a stance. They don't realize body language is 60% of your communication. Anyways, fast forward, I start doing from that day forward only scenario-based self-defense, and we didn't call it that then, but we would say, okay, here's a scenario. You're at an ATM, you're at a bank, you're out on a date, something happens. And in that discussion, it would create like an emotional context. So it wasn't just tap gloves in the ring, let's go. And I started to notice that people who had real good physical skills, when we put them in a scenario, they lost access to these skills. They started worrying and overthinking, and the timing wasn't. It wasn't like a metronome. You're in the ring for 3 minutes or 5 minutes. It was, you didn't know when shit was going to kick off because it was a good scenario. And imagine the difference. Like We put on boxing gloves and we go, oh, put on a mouth guard. Oh, you don't have your mouth guard. Let's go to the body. We spar. There's performance anxiety. But if I said, Ruben, go stand outside, put this headgear on, and one of my role players is going to come up and he might ask you for money. He might come up to you and say, hey, man, stay away from my girlfriend. Like, you don't know what the scenario is going to be. So you're stuck in this, like, almost an improv, and people's hearts started to race physically. And it was during this, I call the 80s my incubation period, because I started looking at really skilled people and I'd be going, wow, they're not that they sucked, but they weren't able to access their complex motor skills. And that was when I first started exploring like the importance of fear and the idea that if you don't manage your fear, you're not going to manage to fight. Doesn't mean you're going to win or lose. There's an old expression, some days you're the bug and some days you're the windshield. Like, so you can lose a fight, of course. But if you can't manage the fear, and this is the most powerful thing, there are two levels that I love to share and discuss about fear. One is the physiology of fear and what your body's doing. But then the more important one is the psychology of fear. And that's what you're thinking. And the mental movie you're producing when you start to overthink fear. So a fear spike creates doubt, doubt creates hesitation, hesitation creates procrastination. You've had it, I've had it. It's interesting because now I'm considered like this world-renowned fear management expert, and I get asked, hey, what's it like to have no fear? And I'm like you're talking to me, like taxi driver, you're talking to me? Like, I was nervous before this, and people are like I made a joke, right? Hey, I'm nervous. I'm nervous, but I'm not nervous because I'm afraid to public speak. I've been on, I don't know how many hundreds of podcasts. I'm nervous because my message is so important, and I want to do a good job, and I want to do a good job for you, and I want your brand to grow through our conversation and all of that. When you care about stuff, you get performance anxiety. Yeah. If you don't know how to reconcile that in your mind, I could have come up here. Let's say I could pretend I could pretend no fear, and I go, "Hi, I'm here to talk." Excuse me, like your voice is quavering, you can't breathe. But all of that to say is, like, in the 80s, I started really looking at the psychology of fear versus the biology and physiology and the neurobiology of fear, and that evolved over decades into like this division of just within the company of no fear, and it's ironic because you loosely know my body of work. We mostly, I've been around teaching for over 40 years, mostly tier 1 operators, SWAT, military, law enforcement all over the world, multiple countries. We have crazy courses, gunfighter courses, ground fighting courses, weapon protection courses. If you said to me, Tony, pick the most important course you teach now, it would be a class where you're just sitting there listening to this. If you don't manage your fear, you're not going to manage to fight. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. How do you make fear your fuel? If your mind, in the metaphor that I was about to share 10 minutes ago, was your body is a car, your mind is the nav system. And when you're going to do anything outside your comfort zone, you're going to have fear. And if you overthink the fear, you either never hit that flow state, or you don't perform to your potential, or maybe not even your capacity. And it ends up being a negative experience if you emotionally, psychologically can't reconcile it. Because then you go, man, I hate doing that. And your body will move away from things it hates. So managing fear, it's when I listened to your first episode just to really understand where you were coming from with the podcast, and we're saying the exact same thing using different language. Yeah, you can't self-actualize if fear is holding you back, and one of the ways to do that is to lean into fear and or try to understand how love is that force. If I will protect myself and my family because of love, but I'm going to have fear when I'm doing that, and I've got to use that fear as a fuel. But anyways, it's a very nice synchronicity, connection there.
Yeah.
So.
Because, I mean, what you're really talking about, there's benefits to fear, but it's the paralyzing effect that fear can cause on a human. And then we're stuck in our emotions. We don't know how to process that. And then we feel these things, right? Mm-hmm. There's an exercise I go through. I ask people, close your eyes, pretend you're getting into a fight. What is the feeling physically happening through your body? Right? Goosebumps, high heart rate, sweating, all these things that are happening and you're freaking out. Okay, close your eyes now and remember the first time you went in for a kiss.
Right? Same
Exact feeling. So love and fear feels the same.
Right.
So it's just how we're choosing to see it.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting because you see a lot of people paralyzed in life, stagnating in life, letting life being bystanders in life instead of playing the game of life because of fear.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like operating out of love or looking at it through the lens of love is like, how do we look for the answers to that fear through love and come from that instead of violence and instead of that whole downward spiral, So
yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think that for a lot, certainly I'll generalize and just group most men probably the love thing. It's like if you say to somebody, look, be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's an education. So we need your voice. We need that message. The thing you talked about how people get immobilized by that, and that the first time you're going to kiss somebody or ask somebody out on a date or whatever, those feelings, I mean, they're the same if you got a fear of public speaking. They're the same if you got a fear, should I ask this person to marry me? If I say, hey, look, hey, you got to fire that guy. If you haven't been taught how to manage confrontations, most people, like it takes them a year or 2 or 3 years to fire somebody or get out of a bad relationship. Or the application, it's not just romance and violence. Yeah. This is everything. There's a the motivational speaker Wayne Dwyer, the name. Okay. He said something I don't know if I heard this on audio of one of his talks or a book, but I love sharing it. He goes, if you didn't know what you did and you looked at all the things that people do around the world, what would you want to do and why aren't you doing that? If you didn't know where you lived and you looked at all the places you could live around the world, where would you want to live and why aren't you living there? And his third question is, if you didn't know how old you were and you looked in the mirror, how old did you think you were? Those three things blow again, because I look at that, and if you could line that up, I guarantee the last one, you look 10 or 20 years younger because you're doing what you love and you're living where you love. And if we put that out there, there will be a bunch of people listening to going, well, that's easier for Blauer to say or Ruben to say, like, they live in California or they look. I didn't always live in California, right? And you didn't always paint. And I guarantee that if we went back in time, and you probably remember this, there was a ton of fear and hesitation. The day when you were successful in business, you were dreaming and thinking, I hate this. And that might have taken you 1 or 2 or 7 years before you went, I'm done. And then it was after the dust settled, like, wow, what did I wait so long for? Right? But it was fear holding you back from scrapping finance and business and going for, I'm going all in on what I love. Yeah. So it's everybody listening to this. Fear throttles everything we do, from who we talk to, therefore who we marry and who our friends are. Obviously you're still training. Fear throttles how much weight you can lift. You warm up perfectly with a PVC bar, and then you start putting weight on. Your range of motion, your skills still the same, and then there's a certain weight where your brain goes, I don't know about this. Yeah. And before you ever injured yourself working out, of course. Every time I've pulled a hamstring or jacked up my back, just as I grabbed the bar, a little voice in my head said, Yeah, that this feels heavy, or your weight, or your back, or your setup, and I caution people. That's your intuition whispering in your ear, and don't let your ego or pride override that. Mm-hmm. Pause and step away. But there's always an element of fear, I believe, and statistically, it seems to be true. There's a little nuance. In fact, from the self-defense side, every person I've interviewed over the last 30, 40 years, victims of violence, every single one of them said they had a bad feeling before the attack. Mm. And so there's a real connection between our intuition, our voice, and then our fear shutting it down. So when we change our relationship with fear, we change our mind. If you change your mind, you change how your day goes. You change how your day goes, you change your week. You get the algorithm, you can change your life if you can change your relationship with fear.
Yeah. You are in control of your outcomes, you know? And I say a lot of these things, and I do say it very carefully because most of the time I'm just speaking from my own experience, right? In finance, 5 years in, I'm sitting there hating it, depressed. Like, why am I depressed? I'm fit, I'm healthy, no baggage, no kids, no nothing. Like, I live in LA. Like, why would I be feeling this way?
Right.
But then I am feeling this way. Then I go finally start doing some work on myself, figure out I need to get out of this thing, find my love for art again, go become an artist, because I didn't have a formula. I had a formula for what it's like to go do finance. I didn't have a formula for what it's like to be an artist. 3 years of kicking that can around, I was like, I'm living in mediocrity here. I'm failing at both because I'm sabotaging finance because I know if I stay successful, how much harder it'll be to leave. And I'm not even giving art a full chance because I have no idea what it is and I'm still holding on to the past. Mm. And then one day I said, you know what? I'm out. Didn't go back in, and this just took off.
Nice. Good for you, man. It's that moment's a big leap, and it's scary. It's scary, but it comes back to, you know, I smile inside and a little bit of smile externally, because people think, and this is that no fear versus KNOW fear. There are lots of things that we need to do in life with fear. Mm-hmm. Right? There's this absolute that people have is like, when I'm good enough, I'll have no fear. When I'm rich enough, I'll have no worries about security or, you know, and it's just not, life is a roller coaster. And, you know, nobody has like 3 days in a row and then goes, wow, I hope something catastrophic happens tomorrow so I can practice my resiliency. like we all want to be happy. We all want shit to just be smooth. It's just not the case. And you need to just, it comes in, there's a pre-contact cue, there's going to be a physiological response. You mentioned systems, and that's really what it's about, is understand the system. I got a fun story so I coach, you know, all sorts of people now, you know, with this, from athletes to business to whatever. And it's the funniest thing is like getting a SWAT team or a military team and saying, guys, we're going to do a block on fear management. And these guys like jump out of airplanes at 20,000 feet, you know, get into gunfights. And they're like, if they don't know my background, they're like, what? And then suddenly they realize what it's about. The fear spike creates a metaphoric movie studio in your mind. And I love to use the acronym false expectations appearing real. We're visualizing something in the future that hasn't even happened, and it's impacting what we're doing in the present. Mm. So, you know, if you're worried about a deadline for a commissioned piece of art, that's going to mess up your creativity. Mm-hmm. If you're, you know, if someone says, hey man, I'll put you on this show, but I need 4 new pieces, and you're worried about who's going to maybe buy this or look at this, you're not going to be able to paint your best stuff, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about. You got a big smile on my face. You've experienced stuff like that. Until you clear your fear, literally clear your fear. And it doesn't mean I'm now without fear. It's identifying what the fear is. When 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into 3 months, people who don't know what I do, my company, we train law enforcement, military all over the world. It's all in person. We get paid after the event. Mm-hmm. So imagine if I'm training first responders as my main source of income, I went from making money to zero money immediately. And 3 months in, I'm like, okay, this is not sustainable. And I'm sitting in my office and the kids are playing and everyone's like cool. And, if you had your shit together, the beginning of the pandemic was okay for some people, horrible for other people. But it was okay. You're spending more time with family. You're catching up on reading. Maybe you're working out. But I'm sitting in my office and I'm like running the numbers and I go, I'm going to lose everything from my ability to feed my family, my home, whatever materialistic bullshit I've acquired. It's going to be gone. And I got so scared. It was like somebody stuck a vacuum in my ass and was sucking out my insides. And here I am, Mr. Fear Management. I want to puke. And the next day, I called my team together and I said, we're going to lose everything if we don't figure this out. So we got to do some major pivot here. And I told them, I said, you can't fix a problem if you are the problem. So we can't be scared. What are we going to do? And one of the guys, I was talking to some friends, and I'm like, I can't pay my mortgage. I can't. There's no money coming in. And this buddy of mine, he says, tongue-in-cheek sarcasm, he says, like, aren't you like a kind of a world-famous self-defense guy? And I said, yeah. He says, I have 150 people work out with me he's in big in fitness. 150 people who work out with me on Zoom. He says, I don't charge them because they're part of our program. And he says, but why can't you teach people out of your garage and do that? And I was like, holy shit. So I did a very vulnerable, real video. I sent it out to my mail list. I had 100 people sign up like within 5 days. And that saved my company. And I started teaching, and there's a whole fear story behind that, as, because the first day, the first class, I'm walking around the house going like this. And my wife looks at me, Jessie looks at me, and she goes, are you okay? I said, I am so fucking nervous. She goes, why would you be nervous? And I've been teaching online for years, doing seminars and stuff, like WebEx, Skype, like way before Zoom was even a company. She goes, you're the best spear instructor in the world because you created it. It's on Zoom, so you don't have to touch anybody. You're not going to get COVID on Zoom. What are you even thinking? And I said, and this is the whole point about fear, and this is the story. Hopefully the message comes clear to your audience. It doesn't, just because I'm a fear management consultant doesn't mean I'm without fear. Lesson number one. Just because I understand what I'm afraid of doesn't mean it goes away. But the power of it is if I know what I'm afraid of, I now can have respect or a strategy to embrace the fear and turn into some sort of fuel. When you don't know what you're afraid of, how many times have you walked into a room with a wife or friend, something's really bothering them, you could see it in their body language and you go, hey, what's wrong? And they're going, nothing, why, what's up? And then 3 days later, you find out about the problem because they don't have the self-awareness to navigate and find out what is the source of the fear. Which my wife suggests to me, well, what are you afraid of? Like I said, I need this to work. You don't remember this, but I started this business teaching in my garage, and I need to save it teaching in my garage. And that full circle, 40 years later, I mean, it was insane. But what I was able to do with like 100 people on Zoom is say, listen, first of all, I am so grateful that you signed up and showed up because you're saving the company. And a lot of people can't, like there's a lot of people that can't afford your art, right? To commission a piece. There's a lot of people who can't afford to do a private lesson with me or get to a seminar, geography, finances. This gave them an opportunity to experience that, to get the training. But it was so neat that I was able to identify it. It didn't change the physiology, but I was able to lean into it and be vulnerable and just tell people, as opposed to, I don't know why I'm so fucking nervous. Now, here's the cool concept. Our brain is what I'm obviously a storyteller. I love explaining the principle through a story. People can relate, I think, better. When you get a fear spike and you don't know how to reconcile it, you start a movie in your mind. You get a toothache. You go, I hate going to the dentist. I'm not going to call him. It'll probably go away. It doesn't go away. It gets worse. You don't rush to the dentist. The dentist usually gives you shit going, hey, next time, call me. take these antibiotics. Man, we got to pull this. This is dangerous. We let things, whether it's finances, romances, we let things fester, thinking time will solve all problems, as opposed to figuring out how to manage your time and be more efficient with anything. And so the metaphor I want to share with your audience is this: that you're the producer. You get a fear spike. Fear creates doubt, hesitation, procrastination. If you can't check it through a skill set of self-awareness, you start to produce a movie in your mind. The false expectations appearing real. And you're the producer, you're the director, you're the screenwriter, and you've cast yourself as victim number one in a fucking horror movie that you're producing. And if you can't go, whoa, why am I thinking that? I mean, I've been waiting, let's say, like my daughter's supposed to be home, and I'm doing this. And here I am. I'm very lucid with this shit. And next thing I know, I visualizing a car accident. Now I'm visualizing her being kidnapped. No, now I'm visualizing her getting raped. And the movie will play until I realize I'm doing it. And then I'm like, whoa, dude, stop that, right? And that's what it is. Like, and I ask people in our seminars, how many of you without fail will walk out of a bad movie? What about you? You're in a bad movie, will you walk out? Or do you give it a chance? You went, man, I just spent $20 on popcorn and parking.
I give it a chance.
Right.
And then there's one movie that I wish I walked out on.
What was that?
It was Alexander.
Okay.
I hated it.
Okay.
I want my life back.
So this is an interesting thing. You know, a couple of things we'll say is like, you know, let's say I got 30 people in a seminar. I go, how many of you always return food if it's not cooked the way you like? And there's only ever one or two people, and they go, yeah. And the rest of people are like, no, I'm not doing that. And I'm going, why not? They go, I go, because they might do something in the kitchen, you know, like let's get some extra seasoning there that's fear. How many of you, if somebody treats you poorly or says something or disrespects you, can assert yourself and go, hey man, come on, don't talk to me that way, or whatever? Most people don't. Most people, I'll be in a bad movie. And if in 10, 15 minutes, I go, oh, the best cut of this movie was the 1 minute trailer we saw on that sucked us in here. Yeah. I'm like, let's get out of here. No, it might get better. No, this isn't getting better. And we can never get this 90 minutes back. Go for a walk, go read a book, go work out, go do anything, but sit here going, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit. Take that and apply that to your life. That's this movie metaphor in your mind. I am now in real time creating a reality show in my brain that's fucking up my life right now. And what's the only resource we can't get back? Time. So fear management actually is time management. If you manage your fear, you can manage your time. And it's fucking, to me, that's like a huge realization when you connect that.
And you keep saying it. You keep saying doubt leads to hesitation, leads to procrastination. And I am a procrastinator for a multitude of reasons. And I love to rationalize that. You know what? I do better when I'm up against the deadline, creating my own sense of urgency. But now I'm just realizing I'm really working through the doubt and the hesitation that made me procrastinate to give myself the urgency to get past all the fear. But not realizing that working the process like you're talking about.
Interesting.
It's just
so there's two more stages past the procrastination. And we'll come back to what you said, because that's an amazing self-awareness piece. But as an artist, so I love to write. And I love to, like, when I design, let's say, drills. You know, I've been doing this for 43 years now, so I'm pretty fast at hitting like an intentional flow state. And I'll go, okay, guys, hold on a sec. Okay, I got it. Right? And I'm just downloading shit. But there are lots of times, and I'm like you, where I go, I should write this, I should finish this, but I know if it's due on Saturday, that it's going to be way better. And it's just the way, you know, I'm a multitasker too. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and artists are, but there's a whole business out there that says you can't multitask. And I always joke, well, the people who say that can't multitask. And so that's why they would say that. But people who can multitask, say, oh, you can't apply. Then I go, I've done pretty good multitasking.
Or they say you're not optimal in all the things you're doing. Right. They're all suboptimal.
Right. And it's hard to when you're an entrepreneur and you're an artist, it's hard to have that debate, and so it's again it's like belief systems. Mm-hmm. So but I'm like you. I'll wait. I want to feel that pressure. I want to. And it's a reframe. Is like, do we thrive on the adrenaline of that pressure? And if that's where we get the best art from you, then why would you change that? Now, there may be other areas, but this is the whole formula is doubt creates hesitation. So the fear spike starts first. Mm-hmm. I'm hanging out, and then all of a sudden you go, oh my God, that painting's due. The fear spike triggers the doubt. Doubt creates hesitation. That's normal for anybody. I don't care how good you get. If a stimulus is introduced too quickly, anything, you're going to go, shit, your body's going to react to that. There'll be a physiological response, will trigger a psychological response. That's just the neurobiology of survival. Mm-hmm. And then doubt creates hesitation. This is where the danger is, because if you go, I go, hey man, did you start that painting? And you go, actually, no, I'm starting it in 12 hours. Well, holy shit, aren't you cutting it close? No, you don't understand. Like, that's where when my adrenaline fires, I put on the music and fucking shit starts to flow. Mm-hmm. If you know your ritual, and then you can exploit that. If it's compromising other parts of your life, that's a problem, but that's mm-hmm. also a self-awareness piece. But the last two parts of it, if it's unchecked, if you're in the procrastination state, so I would argue semantically that you're not procrastinating. What you're doing is you're in this kind of preparatory stage where procrastinating would be, okay, I've now waited to the deadline and now I'm biting my nails, or I'm giving myself other shit to do because I don't want to do the painting. But if you know what your ritual is, and it just made me think of it like an amazing fight, like a professional fight story. But the next two stages after that is if you don't check it. What I mean, if you don't go, why am I procrastinating? Oh, it's this. Why am I nervous? Oh, it's this. What should I do now? With this fear as fuel in a positive sense. If you don't know at that point, then what happens is it goes into a non-clinical anxiety, or in some cases, and I'm not a doctor, a clinical anxiety. Like people who, if you really just at a base level study anxiety, it's all about fear of the past or fear of the future. And what's interesting, and I just say this, I'm not doing it, but I like to brag about this because it blows my mind. I've got psychologists, professional psychologists, who use our models to help treat people with PTSD because it's so pure and so direct. There's no, I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but it's not psychobabble. We're not going into, it's like, hey, you're here, you're in the fear loop. You need to get out of the fear loop. Mm-hmm. Stop thinking this stuff. So that's the whole thing is you've got to go and recognize, like, I'm scared. What am I doing? And I'm fascinated. I want to think about that a little bit more, like how you paint and how you do that. Because I might argue that you're not really procrastinating. You know your system, you know your rhythm. And what I was going to say, and this might be more clear to people listening who aren't artists or entrepreneurs, I've been inside like pro boxing and pro MMA changing rooms. So I'm down there, and you're in a fight room, and there's a guy with 50 fights and a guy with, like, unless you're Conor McGregor, you don't have your own changing room. You're there with maybe 6, 8, sometimes 10 other fighters, depending on the level of the card. And there's, one guy sitting there like this, doing the sewing machine on his leg. He's sitting there like this. Another guy walking around, punching his face. Somebody else right in front of a locker going clink, clink. And then, other people. And do you remember Maurice Smith? Mm-hmm. The name Maurice Smith. He was a K1 fighter. He won a UFC fighter, UFC one year, heavyweight, amazing fighter. And I would interview fighters. I would interview victims of violence because I knew this was my calling to teach this stuff, but there was no way there was no ethical, legal, safe way to get into a bunch of violent encounters to go, this is my experience, and and who cares? Like, it's stupid that way. So I would interview people who experience violence. So I interview fighters as well. And I remember asking Maurice, I said, hey, what's your pre-fight ritual? How do you manage fear? He looks at me, goes, let me ask you a question. I said, okay. He goes, do you have a job? I said, yes, I do. He goes, are you afraid to go to work? I said, nope. He goes, me either. And I was like, holy shit, that should be a line in a movie. That's a cool line. You got a big smile on your face from it. But imagine if it's your first fight, you're shitting your pants. People don't realize Mike Tyson used to puke before fights. George St. Pierre, if you watch, like he's come out recently and told people the worst day of his life was every fight day he was scared to death.
Yeah.
And only one fight he wasn't scared. Matt Serra fight, and Serra knocked him out. And St. Pierre jokes about that. So there are great examples of great world-class athletes and business people. It's just semantics. They don't explain it in the same way. But it's not about no fear. It's about managing fear and changing a relationship with it. So I don't know, man. I'm off on 900 tangents here.
Interesting. No, I love that. So we've gone through a lot of scenarios, a lot of examples, but let's distill it down to the listener. Like, what are the simplest way of like, hey, tomorrow I'm waking up and I'm afraid to confront my boss for a raise, or I've got to submit an invoice for a new project and I'm afraid that I'm charging too much or too little, or I've got to have this conversation with my significant other. What would be the 1, 2, 3 steps to get through something like that?
Yeah, so great question. So it's interesting because the formula is the same for everything. And that's, I think, probably the magic of the system. And I hope I don't share it too clearly so people don't want to train with me. Like, I'm just going to listen to this podcast and I got it. But in all seriousness, it's like, let's use, what was the first one? It was the raise. They said, like, so, most people, I go, hey, you should ask your boss for a raise. No, man, like business isn't good right now and they're not going to do that. Like, you start to rationalize it. But if you keep asking your question, why are you like arguing to not get a raise, right? Well, no, it's just not a good time. Why isn't it? When is a good time to, when's a good time to have a kid? When is a good time to, like, you can just argue this isn't a good time financially. This isn't a good time. It happens when it happens and then you figure it out. If you deserve a raise and you're too nervous to ask a raise, the first thing you need to do, it's that self-awareness piece of going, I have to acknowledge the fear. So that's that doubt creates, the fear spike creates doubt creates hesitation. Okay, why am I procrastinating? And I forgot the fourth one after that is fixation. Fixation leads to the non-clinical anxiety. So I know people who are in a job that they like or don't like, but they're still making the same money. And I go, did you ever ask your boss for the raise? No, business, you know what? It's okay. I'm doing less work here, or I got an assistant, and no, it's when you peel the onion, I'm afraid to ask for the raise because I'm afraid to get fired. And if I get fired, I will have no security. And if I have no security, I won't be able, you need to run that and unravel that and then get to the point where you go, you know what? If I lost everything right now, what would I do? Would I put my thumb in my mouth like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber? Remember that? That's the bathroom scene, and just cry for mommy? Or would I figure it out? What would happen if your boss came in and said, hey man, we're letting you go. Sorry, you suck. We don't like you, or we've got to downsize. And you've got to have those conversations, but it can't start without you acknowledging that what exactly are you afraid of? And then you may have to go into the meeting. This is the hardest thing for people. It's not like a light switch. You may have to go into that meeting and say, hey, listen, boss, I'm working here for 3-4 years, busting my ass and everything, and I'm so nervous to ask you this. I can't even breathe right now. But I really think I deserve a raise. Here's why, or whatever. And then your boss goes, yes, no, right? But you've already worked out what you're going to do after. The conversation has to happen. When you don't manage fear, it impacts your self-esteem and your dignity. And that's the subtle thing that people never think about. You get really good at talking yourself out of things that you need to do. So that's the biggest danger. But any example, asking somebody on a date, having a hard conversation, asking somebody, it's, why are you hesitating? I remember a joke I was making is like, there was this girl, Lucy, who was everyone wanted to date her in high school, and everyone wanted to take her to the prom. And I had become friends with her through a friend of a friend, and she was like the gorgeous, and I'm like, I'd become friends with her, we're in a couple of classes, hey, Lucy, and I'm going, okay, I'm going to ask her to the prom. Oh, I just want to, hold on, let me throw up, right? Like, I couldn't do it. And I'm waiting, and then one day, I finally go, hey, Lucy. Hey, Tony, what's up? Hey, are you, excuse me, did you have anything to, would you go to the prom with me? She goes, oh my God, I'd love to. But John asked me yesterday, and I'm like, I'm sorry. And I'm going, John, if she's going with John, she would have gone with me, but I waited, right? So it like everyone has stories like that. Mm-hmm. All of it is, I can't get time back. I'm wasting time here. I got to manage my fear. If I manage my fear, I manage my time. And the biggest thing people have to get over is this idea, like we have an idea from watching movies and watching unicorns, because what do we study in life? You know what I mean? I mean, unicorn is a metaphor, right? Mm-hmm. Like we watch like a TV show, whether it's Entourage or Billions or whatever, and we go, wow, I need to be like that character. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, that's a fucking actor who rehearsed, right? And someone wrote cool lines, right? And I never finished the story with Maurice Smith. That's a cool line. Hey, man, do you have a job? Yeah. Are you afraid to go to work? No. Me either. Like, oh, holy shit. But as a fighting coach, imagine if I told all my fighters that. And Maurice Smith, he would, before his fights, he'd be on a massage table, like with, headphones on, just listening to rhythm and blues. But imagine if you need to listen to Metallica or Rage in the Machine before your fight. That's what you grew up on, or to rap music. And I go, I'm coaching you. You're listening to, you want to be world champion? You're going to model Maurice. You're not going to be afraid. And you're going to listen to this music. Like suddenly we put everyone out of their element. It'd almost be like me saying to you, hey, you hired me as your life coach, man. No more procrastination. You're going to paint from 9 in the morning till 10 every day, and you're going to get used to producing there. Well, suddenly it's assembly line shit because there's no moment of inspiration. I don't know if I answered the question effectively or sufficiently. I want to share this one story of an athlete who called me up on a Wednesday, and she said, I've got a competition on Saturday, and I heard you're like the Anthony Robbins of self-defense and fighting, and this psychology guy and fear management, and she says, I get so fearful, I think I'm going to die. And I said, how long has this been going on? She's like 10 years as like a high level athlete. And she goes, and she said, it happens like Wednesday night, and then I'm not sleeping Thursday, Friday, not eating well. And I know I would just perform better if I was sleeping and eating better. But I'm so nervous, I want to die. So I paused, and we're doing a Zoom call, and I looked at her and I said, so in the last 10 years, when this fear spike happened and you've wanted to die, can I just from my notes, how many times have you died? I just need to know you actually died from this. And she laughs and she goes, like, never. I said, oh, okay. So it's a threat of death. And fear is saying to you, I'm going to kill you, or you're going, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. I'm so scared. And she pauses and looks at me. And I'm going to share something super, super heavy. It's a slide in every single one of my courses. And I ask people, how many times in your life have you been intimidated? And we've all been intimidated. Yeah. And the slide says this: the psychology of intimidation is when we visualize what our opponent can do to us instead of what we must do to our opponent. Now, that's a self-defense phrase, but you substitute opponent for the banker. Hey man, I want this much money for this job. And he goes, you got to remind, who do you think you are? You've got to be prepared to go, that's my price, and walk away. And that's the fear management before that. So I said to this athlete. I said, here's what I want you to do. You're waiting for the fear to happen. So you're participating in manifesting it. I said, now when it comes in tonight, I said, you got like a favorite old movie, Casablanca or something? She's like, yeah. You got some favorite old books, that you like to reread every now and then? She says, yeah. I said, as soon as your physiology starts to change. So the first thing was cue in and kind of dial in her self-awareness. I'm starting to get those butterflies. I'm starting to get, here it comes. I want you to turn and imagine, here's the fear coming, and look at it and go, come here, you little fucker. And go, guess what? We're watching Casablanca tonight, and then we're reading. And she looks at me, I go, I'm fucking serious. You better do this. Come here, you little fucker. And just change the relationship, change the dynamic. And it's, if we go back to the car analogy, right? You're driving somewhere and fear, your car in your body, or the metaphor, your mind is the the nav system, and the gas that fuels the car. Don't be a contrarian, people, and go, hey, we're green, we're not using gas. Just go with the metaphor. The gas. So I'm going somewhere fast because there's danger chasing me, or I got to get somewhere something important's happening. I hit the gas. I don't want the gas to be the backseat driver going, you're going the wrong way. You're not going to miss your turn. You're going to be late for the meeting. You want to look at fear and go, there you are. Whew, okay, hey, buckle up, fucker. Here we go. And really change that relationship. She calls me the next day, man. She goes, I don't even remember falling asleep, but I slept all night. Holy shit. Wow. And it's just explaining, like, you could have the fear spike, but you know what it is. And it's neat. I try to play in the same way you've created like a whole language and message from one fucking word, man. That's what I've done. Yeah. And it's just one word. And if you can, I'm going to, be inspired by your word. If you can find a way to love fear and go, whoa, what is fear teaching me right now? What do I need to? And I was contemplating wearing it, but I didn't know if it's appropriate. I've got a fuck fear shirt. And fuck is an acronym for face it, understand it, control it, know it. That when you get your fear spike, if you go, oh man, where's that shirt again? What's that acronym? Oh, it's fuck fear. And it's not to be cool and cavalier, but it's fuck fear is a heavy strategy. You asked for a system. There's 4. Yeah. Face it. Because if you face it, you need to research it. Why is my tooth hurting me? Why can't I talk to my boss? Why? Understand it. That's the research. Then control it, because you may go, okay, I've gotten on stage and I'm a good speaker. I'm comfortable speaking. I've gotten on stage where I thought I was talking to 50 people, and then I open a curtain, there's 500 people, it's live TV. And I turned to the guy that said, like, hey man, you asked me to like talk to your group. You didn't say it was 500 people. Well, I thought you knew. And I'm like, holy shit. And I'll put this earpiece in because we're live. And don't swear. You don't want me to fucking swear? That's like part of, like, just and my heart starts racing and I'm starting to sweat. And what do? I need to manage my fear. I can't go out there and go, fear management consultant, and I'm here to talk to you about fear. Like, what? It's a fascinating reframe. And I think it's very, using a different word, synergistic with your whole messaging. So I'm glad I listened to that first podcast of yours.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So face it, understand it,
control it,
and
then know it. And it's like changing a relationship. I've known you for years, but this might be the longest we've ever talked in one sitting. And we've had lots of conversations and texts and, work out here and come up to, get the painting and stuff like that. So if we metaphorically think of the metaphor, now we're more comfortable talking to each other. And the next time we talk, it'll be a deeper or more meaningful conversation, or it won't, but there's no pressure on it, because it's that trust development. We need to do that with fear. It's a fuel that influences who we become. And so people ask, well, how do I get good at this? You can practice courage, and that's the reframe. Managing fear is practicing courage. And that's to me like a beautiful thought. Fear is contagious, so is courage. You need to stand up for yourself first. So You practice courage by starting with, like, if you go, I'm afraid of heights. Okay, Tony said I got to manage fear. Well, don't climb Everest as your first. That's what I'm just going to go all in. You know, you start off with little baby steps. What are the little things, and notice them. You know, is it the sending back food and finding a polite, careful? The first time you send back food, you're going to be nervous. Hey, sorry to bother you. Mm-hmm. You know, the waiter didn't make it. They don't care. It's overdone. You asked for medium rare. Send it back. Don't be an asshole because you might get special sauce, right? But it's neat. You can practice courage, and that's really what managing fear is.
Well, this is amazing. And I do want to ask one more question in the context of what's so heated right now in the news. I know how, you know, it gets my wife hot and bothered. It gets people that I know hot and bothered. But right now, there's two very important things, right? Roe versus Wade being overturned, taking the rights away from women, and then the gun violence that keeps on happening. Mm-hmm. And my question around this is the contagion of fear and how we've got these two sides just attacking each other, but they're attacking from fear. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you start navigating that and realizing, like, whoa, I'm in the cycle of this contagion? And it's not saying that you're right or wrong for this isn't about being right or wrong or opinions, but like, how do we actually navigate these conversations rationally without fear driving it? Because then that just makes it go out of hand, right? That's where we're in these situations right now where people are just, you're wrong, I'm right. I'm right, you're wrong.
It's crazy. Great questions. Great. Like, so the bigger thing is we've gotten to the point where we humans have been hacked, and we've been hacked by big tech. And we can, with a tweet, with a buzz, with a pop-up on your phone, hey, you've been exposed to somebody within 6 feet of you, and now you're like and you're like going, and you stop thinking about your immune system. Nobody's thinking right now, like, where did COVID go? Did it just stop? And why are they injecting 6-month-old babies? And if you do the research, you go, why are they censoring doctors? When did you, all of a sudden you can't have a scientific conversation about something? Mm-hmm. Why did Pfizer want to keep their documents hidden for 75 years? Because everyone who got injected would be dead of old age or the vaccine by then. Mm-hmm. You can believe in whatever you want, but it comes back to fuck fear. You got to face it, you got to understand it, you got to control it, you got to know it. But in that process, you got to do your research. And a lot of people aren't doing research. No. You and I can't get pregnant. You know that. Okay. You sure?
Didn't know.
Okay.
I was unsure.
Just letting you know. So the Roe versus Wade thing, I did a little bit of research, and all they're saying is, we're going to let the state decide, so get involved at the local level politics and vote the way you want. And that's all. So a lot of what we see in the news is the manipulation of big tech, of politicians, of manipulation, of, you got an election cycle coming up. Why did this just come up now? Well, they want people freaking out, and they want, the people in power want to remain in power. Mm-hmm. And it's just a huge manipulation. The gun stuff, that's obviously a mental health issue. And no one's talking about, the recent shooting with the Highland. You see pictures of this guy?
Oh, yes.
Oh, my God.
Yes, I just saw them.
This is not like a gun issue, and he got all this stuff legally. He was insane, but he was also on a watch list. He'd also been visited. He had also threatened to kill people in the past. 3 years ago, threatened to kill his whole family with a samurai sword. All this stuff, and it's insanity. But you can drive yourself insane. I was timing where I was to come over to the show. So I popped open. I didn't want to read any business emails. So I'm just online looking social. And I'm sitting there, Instagram, Twitter. And in 15 minutes, I was in a bad mood and my body was like shaking. Mm-hmm. But this is the fear stuff. I'm going, wow, I need to change my state before I go to the love podcast. Because I'm like going to walk in going, what the fuck do you want, man? But I had consumed the poison on my own. That's what I mean. We're all hackable now. And that's the biggest thing, is get back your self-awareness. If you can't go to the bathroom without holding your phone, you're fucked. And how many of us, like do that? And you think about that, right? And it's people get their news from an Instagram feed. Like that's not, do your research, but you can't do your research if you don't have self-awareness. And I said this in the first 5 minutes when I hijacked the intro. I didn't even let you do an intro. Is I said, what was it? That if we improve our self-awareness, we improve our critical thinking. If we improve our critical thinking, we improve our situational awareness. So situational awareness is, here comes this, like when in the history of the world did you have like a lottery to take a vaccine? Get free donuts to take a vaccine. Like you got to go, and I don't care if people did it. I know people like that took it, and I know lots of people that didn't take it. But I believe that when I talk to the people that took it, their answers weren't based on research. It was like, well, I don't want to die, to I wanted to travel. And now I know people that are fucked up and no one wants to say or admit what's caused it. But I go, oh, because you wanted to travel, you put this experimental whatever. We don't have to go down that road. But it's like, do your research and then make your choice, because now your choice is based on self-awareness and education. And then you deal with you're living with the consequences of your choice to get out of finance. And you look like you're pretty fucking happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, my sister will never watch the show, so I can say this. She just left a job after like years of hating it. And she took a sizable cut in salary. And that's all she talks about. She's bitter. Like, I really, and I'm like, but she's my sister. I can't coach and mentor her. She's family, right? Unfortunately. But it's like she's choosing to focus on that negativity. You could be bitter about, oh shit, I work for myself. I schedule what I want. I say no. I go, no, I don't want to work with you. I want to work with you. Oh, I'll do this for free. I want to do this for free for the community. Yeah. And then you can go, no, I want $1 million for this, right? Whatever it is. And you created that because you managed fear. But you could also, for a moment, you go, if I'd stayed in finance, I could be a billionaire right now. I was really smart and really good. And if I had all that money, but you'd be on your third heart attack and your second wife or whatever. So,
exactly.
Anyways.
The fear of keeping me in was greater than the fear of leaving. And that's what ultimately I found out, because I played that movie of I might have 2-3 kids. They may hate me, a wife that's divorced. They all resent me. And all I was like, well, you have millions of dollars, because I was an angry a-hole because I came home hating my life. And I couldn't separate church from state, let's say.
Right.
And it didn't matter. And that was the energy. And that to me was worse off than trying to make it happen.
Well, so you intuitively, I call it the 3 I's, instincts, intuition, intelligence. You intuitively figured out, had we been talking back then, I'd go, dude, you're applying this process on your own. Great. And that doesn't surprise me, because you're an artist and an entrepreneur. That's what a lot of us figure out on their own. Because my role was teaching self-defense, and the only way I could get people to protect themselves with greater efficiency is if they manage their fear sooner. Yeah. And so it was serendipitous that I created a formula for it, but it was because I was teaching people how to fight back. Yeah. What was interesting is that the approach became so holistic that it's like self-defense isn't just a physical fight. Self-defense is everything in your life. You're by making the right choices, you're protecting everything that you're about.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to put it. So we're at the final question.
Yes, sir.
My favorite question. How do you define living a life through love?
How do you define living a life through love? I should have listened to the entire podcast, because then I could have prepared the. I think, without sounding like I'm branding it, it's like by getting to know fear and using it to move you towards the things that you're compelled to move towards. So you self-actualize. We all want to, I want my kids to be happy and successful. I want my wife to be happy and successful, and the people around me. And so that balance is, if I really want the best, then I've got to go through whatever crucible or whatever work I need to do on myself or my business and what have you. And it really, I think, it goes back to the Wayne Dwyer thing, is like, do what you love. If it's possible, live where you always want to live. And when you look in the mirror, you're not going to look your real age. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that answers that, but that's what I got.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us, Tony.
Buddy, so good to see you again.
It's been a great conversation. It's fascinating just unpacking fear and looking at it from your lens and being able to share that with the listeners.
Well, I hope they get a couple things out of it. And if you can't remember anything, just remember fuck fear. Remember the acronym, because you will get a fear spike once a day. Something will happen. Yeah. You're late for a meeting. You're in traffic. You're like, fuck. And then go, oh, wait a minute. Okay. And the solution will come to you because you're releasing your intuition.
Yeah. Perfect. And where can everyone find you?
I'm just going to be hanging out here. I'll just be here watching you paint.
Perfect.
So people can just come to the studio and talk to me. The regular social media, Tony Blauer, Blauer, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you are, or, my main website, if you're interested in the self-defense, or if you're in the law enforcement military side, or if you want some coaching in the fear, are BlauerTrainingSystems.com, BLAUER, trainingsystems.com.
Amazing. Thanks, buddy.